Hello and welcome to E-Bible Fellowship's Evening Bible Studies with your speaker, Chris McCann. If you'd like more information or to hear more studies, visit our website at www.ebiblefellowship.com. And now, with your evening Bible study, here's Chris McCann.
Good evening and welcome to E-Bible Fellowship's Bible study in the book of Genesis. Tonight is study number 6 of Genesis chapter 6, and we're going to be looking at verse 4. Genesis 6, verse 4. There were giants in the earth in those days, and also after that, when the sons of God came in unto the daughters of men, and they bare children to them. The same became mighty men which were of old, men of renown. And I'll stop reading there. Now, first of all, in the first part of the verse, it says there were giants in the earth in those days and also after that. And the Hebrew word that God uses here for giants is 5303 in Strong's Concordance. It's not the typical or usual word for giants. This word, 5303, is Nephilim, and it's only used here in this verse and over in Numbers chapter 13, or it's used in Genesis 6 and in Numbers chapter 13, and we'll look at Numbers in just a little bit. The other more used word for giants is a word that would be pronounced Rapha, and it's 7497, so it's nothing near this word as far as how it's spelled. And this is the word that is used of Og, the kingdom of Og. Remember, the king was a giant. It's the word that's used concerning some of the Philistine giants and so forth. And so God intentionally used this word, and again, it's only found in Numbers chapter 13. Let's go over there, outside of Genesis 6, that is, in Numbers 13, and in verses 32 and 33. Numbers 13:32 says, "And they brought up an evil report of the land." This is the spies that were sent to search out the land when Israel first came out of Egypt and entered into the wilderness. The Lord had a man from each of the 12 tribes of Israel go to search out the land, but they returned with an evil report except for Caleb and Joshua. Okay, again, Numbers 13:32. They had brought up an evil report of the land, which they had searched unto the children of Israel, saying, "The land through which we have gone to search it is a land that eateth up the inhabitants thereof, and all the people that we saw in it are men of a great stature. And there we saw the giants, the sons of Anak." And the word giants is the same word as in Genesis 5303. And they are the sons of Anak, which come of the giants. It's the same word again. "And we were in our own sight as grasshoppers, and so we were in their sight." So these giants, the sons of Anak, were very tall men. Well, how tall were they? What would have been considered a giant in the time before the flood? Well, since God uses the same word giant here, we do get some idea of the height of the men that God is speaking of that lived at the time of Noah or the time before the flood. And I'd just like to mention that in Mr. Camping's book, Time Has an End, he went into some detail concerning a cave that was discovered in Lingbua. I'm not sure if that's how you pronounce it, but Lingbua in Indonesia, where there were several skeletal remains. I think there were some complete skeletal remains of people who were found in a cave that was 1,640 feet above sea level. And, of course, what was significant about these remains was the evidence of a flood that they also found in the same cave. There was water-laden sediment that was discovered in the cave with these skeletal remains of several individuals. And that's amazing when you think of it, because it's so high. 1,640 feet is very high up above sea level. How could a flood occurred at that particular height? And of course, the Bible provides the answer with Noah's flood, which was a worldwide cataclysmic event. The Bible says that the flood waters were 15 cubits above the highest mountains. And 15 cubits, each cubit is 1.5 feet. You know, that's very high above the highest mountain in the world. And certainly when the flood began, if people were not naturally cave dwellers, when the flood began and the rain kept falling day after day after day, what would be the natural response for people? To seek higher ground. So if you're in a plain or in a valley, you're going to get flooded out quickly, but there's mountains on either side of you. You start loading your possessions and your family and climbing that tall hill or high mountain and hoping that at some point the rain will stop. But, of course, we know the historical fact that the Bible tells us that the rain poured down for 40 consecutive days. A deluge. 40 days without stopping. Sometimes we see a downpour and we say it's raining like cats and dogs, and really it's like a cloudburst. So much water can fall in just a few minutes, and sometimes that is enough to overflow creeks and nearby waterways, and then it slows, or it might even stop. It could pick up again later. But the flood of Noah's day was a continuous downpouring of unparalleled proportions. It just kept raining, and so people would have kept climbing higher and higher. Again, we don't know the specifics, how much rain fell in each 24-hour period, what the earth was like after a week, or where you happened to be on the earth. If you started out on high ground, well, then your situation would be different than people who are at sea level. And yet we do know it kept raining and kept raining, and so people could have just gone for the highest peak, and perhaps this family went and found a cave in Indonesia, what we now know as Indonesia, and they set up to live there for a while, because as the waters climbed, even if the rain would have stopped, it would have taken some time for the waters to decrease so that they could return back to the valley. And so the waters did not stop, and finally these poor people, they had done everything they could do to escape the flood, but of course you can't go any higher than the highest mountain. And then when the water starts filling the cave, what can you do? There's nowhere left to go. And that's what happened in the case of these people. They drowned. Well, it so happens that the average height of these people, they were fully grown, was 3 feet tall. And so Mr. Camping went into some detail he speculated, but he implied that would have been the average height for people living before the flood. And this is one of the few times that I disagree with Mr. Camping. And I thought it was too much of a generalization. Yes, that family or group of people, their average height was about 3 feet. But that doesn't mean that we can then take their average height and say everyone's average height was about 3 feet. No. And Mr. Camping also did some speculation that Noah and his family were like giants because they were double the average height, about 6 feet. And no, here in Numbers 13, God tells us by using the same Hebrew word for giants that's in Genesis 6, here in Numbers 13. The giants, the sons of Anak. Remember the report from the spies back in verse 32. They said, all the people we saw in it are men of a great stature. Now we have a description of what a giant is. It's a man of great stature. Okay, well, is the Hebrew word translated great stature found anywhere else? And yes, it is. If we go to 1 Chronicles chapter 11, I'll start reading in verse 22. Benaiah, the son of Jehoiada, the son of a valiant man of Kabzeel, who had done many acts. He slew 2 lion-like men of Moab. Also he went down and slew a lion in a pit in a snowy day. And he slew an Egyptian, a man of great stature. That's the same word that's found in Numbers 13, verse 32. And it's referring in Numbers 13:32 to a giant, a son of Anak. Well, we're curious. What does the Bible consider to be the size of a man of great stature? He slew an Egyptian, a man of great stature, 5 cubits high, and in the Egyptian's hand was a spear like a weaver's beam. And I like to finish the verse, even though we basically got the information we came for, but I would not want to leave anyone hanging. And he went down to him with a staff and plucked the spear out of the Egyptian's hand and slew him with his own spear. So the Egyptian, a man of great stature, was 5 cubits high, and a cubit is 1.5 feet. So if you are 5 cubits tall, and therefore you're a man of great stature, how tall are you? Well, that's 5 times 1.5 feet, and that would be 7.5 feet tall, or 7'6", which is a very tall person, even today. Well, actually, I don't know what normal height is anymore. It varies probably from country to country, but let's say normal height is about 6 foot in America. In our modern world, it might be a little higher or a little lower or lesser than that. But still, if we see a person that's 7 foot tall, we think, wow, that man is really tall, and you will see 7-foot tall people playing basketball. 7.5 feet tall is very rare, and that comes to the level of giant. This is a person 1.5 feet taller than those that have average height. And so I think that we can understand when God is saying in Genesis 6, verse 4, and this is just, of course, historically, on the natural level, there were giants in the earth in those days. Nephilim, the word that is only used in Numbers 13 of the sons of Anak, who are described as being men of great stature. And God uses that particular word, description of great stature, in association with an Egyptian giant or man of great stature who was 7.5 feet tall, 5 cubits. And so, certainly the size of men before the flood could have been smaller than man's average size today. Maybe average height was 5'4", 5'5", 5'6". We don't know. But I think it would be saying too much and carrying speculation too far to take the example of one cave and individuals found there and overgeneralizing and saying, well, now this is the height for everyone who lived. And the giants would have been double their height, about 6 feet. No, that's, if the 3 foot is not the average height, then a giant would not have been 6 feet tall. And so that is dependent, saying giants would be 6 feet tall, upon the average height of people of that day. For instance, if there was some sort of another cataclysmic event in Australia, or maybe I'm not sure exactly where pygmies are found, maybe in Africa, but if a family of pygmies were discovered and there were no other known skeletal remains, you see how you could err in drawing a conclusion that everyone alive at that time in all the world was the height of the pygmies that were found. Or also, there are some tribes in Africa where they're very tall members, and if you isolated just that particular site of remains and you could draw a conclusion everyone was so tall. No, there's not enough information. Maybe if there was a second site or a third site found in another location, another part of the world, for confirmation, that sort of information would need further confirmation. But we don't have that, at least not right now. So I think we're comfortable with the Bible's information that a man of great stature, who is called a giant in Numbers 13, is someone 7.5 feet tall. And if that's a giant, then again, normal height, normal average height for men prior to the flood would be same average height as after the flood. It stands to reason also that prior to the flood, health conditions for mankind would have been better because of the water canopy. Men tended to live longer, there was less disease and so forth than after the flood. And when people are taller and you tend to be more physically stronger, it just seems that the weaker human specimen, as far as size and strength, would not have been prior to the flood, but would seem to come afterwards. But that's speculation on my part. All right, let's go back to Genesis 6, verse 4. There were giants in the earth in those days, and also after that. So prior to the flood, there were giants. After the flood, there were giants. And we know this. There was Goliath. There was Og, the king of Bashan, and sons of Goliath, or sons of the Philistine, and so forth. The Egyptian, men of great stature, sons of Anak. There were giants in the world, and a giant is just someone who is about 1.5 to 2 feet taller than average height. And it was before the flood and after the flood. And then it goes on to say, when the sons of God came in unto the daughters of men, and they bare children to them. So the giants spiritually are being connected to the sons of God bearing children to the daughters of men. And this is the second time in just a few verses that God has made this reference to the intermarrying that was going on that provoked God to wrath prior to the time of the flood, which was the pouring out of his wrath. Remember back in verse 1 of Genesis 6, and it came to pass when men began to multiply on the face of the earth, and daughters were born unto them, that the sons of God saw the daughters of men, that they were fair, and they took them wives of all which they chose. Now, we didn't mention this before because it's really too far out, too ridiculous to even spend any time on, but there have been theologians that have commented in their theological writings that the sons of God are angels, and the daughters of men are just women that are, daughters of men, human beings. And the intermarriage that was taking place was between angels and mankind. And so this is their extreme speculation that they have no basis for. It's just a fantasy. It's beyond possibility, beyond the realm of possibility, because angels are spirit beings. And there can be no marriage between an angel, a spirit being, and a man who he possesses a spirit nature, but he has a physical body. That you just cannot have marriages, and you certainly cannot produce children that are born, that come as a result, as verse 4 is telling us. The sons of God came in unto the daughters of men, and they bare children to them. You can see how foolish the theologian's idea is that these sons of God are angelic beings, angels, that are mating with mankind, with the daughters of men, and children are born to them. Well, no, that's not possible. And I remember Mr. Camping used to give an excellent analogy. Angels are a different creature than men. They are not the same kind. And it's like taking an elephant and joining it together with a mouse and saying that, well, the elephant and the mouse are going to have relations and bear offspring. And if we use that kind of comparison, we see just how ridiculous an idea it is. You cannot take one kind and mix it with another kind. You cannot take a spirit being and mix it with a human being. It's not even possible that we would even for a second consider it. Well, again, the sons of God are a reference to the people of God. In 2 Corinthians chapter 6, it says in verse 14, I'll start there and read a few verses. Be not unequally yoked together with unbelievers. An unbeliever, the Greek word is pistos. Pistos is the word for faith. The prefix, negates that which comes after, which means no faith. And Christ is faith. So be not unequally yoked together with people of no faith, or people without Christ. For what fellowship hath righteousness with unrighteousness? And what communion hath light with darkness? And what concord hath Christ with Belial? Or what part hath he that believeth with an infidel? You may not be aware of this, but the word infidel is a translation of the same Greek word as unbeliever. For whatever reason, the King James translators translate it as infidel. Infidelity means really to be without faith. And of course, this is one of those words that the modern man likes to pick at and mock, but it basically means one without faith, an unbeliever. And what agreement hath the temple of God with idols? For ye are the temple of the living God. As God has said, I will dwell in them and walk in them, and I will be their God, and they shall be my people. Wherefore, come out from among them, and be ye separate, saith the Lord, and touch not the unclean thing, and I will receive you, and will be a father unto you, and ye shall be my sons and daughters, saith the Lord Almighty. Sons of God. You see here, God is indicating if you're going to be a son of God, you have to come out from among them. Be ye separate. Be not unequally yoked with those without faith, without Christ, the unbeliever. And so the sons of God are those that were saved by God, that have possession the Spirit of God. They have Christ within. So that line of believers has children who identify with sons of God, but they're not truly born again themselves or truly sons of God. So their eyes wander to the daughters of men, and they desire them. They want them. They marry and bear children.
Thanks for joining us for E-Bible Fellowship's Evening Bible Studies. You can hear these studies Monday through Friday over Paltalk, Skype, E-Bible Fellowship's webcast audio, or over your phone. For more information or to hear other studies, visit www.ebiblefellowship.com. Until our next study, may the Lord's perfect will be done.